right, Mark Rogers TV talking South Carolina football each and every Friday morning with Will Gunter. Catch him on the all-new early game there at 107.5 at the Game in Columbia, South Carolina. All right, Will, we've carved up quarterbacks, running backs, and the offensive line, all key to success. The wide receivers, I like what's going on with Bryan Edwards and with Deebo Samuel. So correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I see, Edwards is the long strider. He's the guy on the outside. He gets downfield. Deebo can do that, but at the same time, he's a little shiftier, a guy that maybe gets some of the more underneath routes. And obviously, he's a guy that also gets the ball out of the backfield as a running back and can really hurt you there with 6 rushing touchdowns. So at least you've got a 1-2 punch that looks like it's emerging at this point.
And they're going to have to fight for their jobs. You know, Deebo Samuel's coming off a 14-catch, 190-yard performance in the Birmingham Bowl against South Florida. But the bottom line is what Bryan McClendon, the wide receivers coach here at South Carolina, has done is really pretty miraculous, given that the final year of Steve Spurrier's era, there were games where they started 2 walk-ons at the wide receiver position. That was a situation that you wonder with a Steve Spurrier led offense, how did you get to a point where 2 walk-ons are starting at wide receiver? But that's kind of where they somehow ended up at due to a bunch of misses in recruiting. Fast forward 2 years and what Bryan McClendon has done. You're right, Deebo Samuel, who is a holdover from the Spurrier regime, but Bryan Edwards, a guy that last year showed flashes, is pretty solid. Chavez Dawkins is a wide receiver who at times last year made a few plays. Corey Banks is a speed guy on the outside. A young man named Randrakis Davis, or Rand Davis, at one time was committed to Georgia, came to South Carolina. He actually had a catch or 2 in the Texas A&M game and looked like a kid who could break into the rotation, and then suffered a hamstring injury and I believe got a medical red shirt, didn't play for the remainder of the year. That's another guy that can factor into the rotation. Then you add on the recruiting class they just brought in, which features Ortre Smith, who was the top player in South Carolina in the recruiting class of 2017. Is a big physical 6'4", 225-pound receiver, kind of in the Alshon Jeffrey mold. You've got another shifty guy in the Deebo Samuel mold, and Shi Smith, who had offers from Alabama and Oklahoma and Florida and is coming to South Carolina. And then there's talk down there that the best receiver is a 6'3", 205 receiver out of Georgia, out of North Paulding High School, Chad Terrell, who chose South Carolina over Oregon. They have weapons, and that's not even counting the tight ends. They have a bunch of weapons. And just this past week, Austin Connor has announced he's going to walk-on the team. This was a young man that had offers from South Carolina, from Georgia, from Duke, from Vanderbilt. He kind of tried to prolong his recruiting experience last year. He was a 2017 recruit, tried to prolong it, wait to see what else he would get, and a lot of those schools filled up. And so instead of taking one of the offers to Vanderbilt or Duke at the very end, he's elected to walk on at South Carolina. Very smart young man, had some Ivy League offers academically, so he'll get some scholarships and some grants. But he's a speed guy. And so you're adding a walk-on who had Power 5 offers early on in his recruitment to that wide receiving group. I think if you're a South Carolina fan, you are thrilled about what Bryan McClendon has been able to do with this particular position and give Jake Bentley a lot of weapons, a lot of different weapons, guys with size, guys with speed, guys that can make you miss in the open field, guys that can block downfield. Very good job, in my opinion, by Bryan McClendon of completely changing the roster here at wide receiver for South Carolina.
Well, this is only one of the reasons why I have you on, because I know that the wide receiver core was a mess a couple years ago. Deebo Samuel with a big season last year. Bryan Edwards, as you mentioned, showed flashes, caught 44 passes. Really, even in game 1 against Vandy, caught a big pass downfield that meant something in a scoring drive in a close game. And I thought, hey, the South Carolina club, I knew Ortre Smith was a big recruit, as you mentioned, #1 player out of the state, but I thought that those guys had it pretty much locked down. But it's always a good thing when you can push the starters, even solid starters, with the incoming guys that are going to, and you need 5 or 6 guys. You definitely need 3 in today's passing offenses. And I remember you just lamenting every time we jumped on a couple years ago. Man, I go out to practice the spring game, whether it not just in the actual games, guys dropping passes left and right. And then you just gave us a nice little soliloquy about having diversity amongst the wide receivers, not just having a guy or two that can play, but man, guys that can block, guys that can come out of the backfield when we're talking Deebo Samuel and catch it on a jet sweep, guys that can play the slot, can play deep, can do a number of things. So it's really been upgraded here recently.
They've done a great job. And you've got a quarterback that can maybe make it all click, but it comes back to, can he get time in the pocket to allow him to get the ball downfield? He was fantastic in the bowl game. And again, you're going to add some weapons to this group. And you're right, Bryan Edwards and Deebo Samuel are going to be guys 1A and 1B, and they're different wide receivers in terms of a guy with height that can maybe go up and win the jump ball situation, and a more shiftier, speedier type guy that can take a bubble screen and maybe take it 30 or 40 yards or make a game-changing type play. So the weapons are there, but it goes back to that offensive line, because if you can't block and give Jake Bentley time, it's really not going to matter how good your wide receivers are if you can't throw the football laying on the ground.